George Santos, a political narcissist. Part 3. We continue our examination of the political narcissist George Santos with an array of narcissistic indicators. In a 2020 interview, Santos said he had been diagnosed with a brain tumour and received radiation treatment. He also claims to suffer from an immunodeficiency and acute chronic bronchitis. Santos did not give details or answer questions about his purported brain tumour. It's suspected that this, of course, is a lie and is the use of ill health to garner pity and sympathy. There have been discrepancies with regard to assets that he has reported on financial disclosure forms, which shows contradictions. He's filed personal financial disclosure forms, which is required of congressional candidates, and he did so 20 months past the due date. Failure to stick to arrangements, lack of punctuality, when he had raised $5,000 in campaign funds. The leader took note of the contrast between them and similar forms he had filed for the 2020 elections. In 2020, he had listed a net worth of $5,000 and claimed his only income was his $50,000 Harbour City salary. By 2022, he said he was worth between $2.5 and $11 million, including $1 to $5 million in personal bank accounts, a Rio condo valued between $500,000 and $1 million, and business interests accounting for the rest. He reported no real property in the United States, at odds with past claims that he had owned 2 mansions on Long Island, one of which, in the Hamptons, he had reportedly told fellow Republicans he was selling for around $10 million because he rarely used it. The leader reported at the time someone with no connection to Santos owned it and it was valued at $2 million. Character trait acquisition, lie, revision of history, triangulation. A $600,000 loan Santos had reported making to his campaign earlier in the year on his required campaign financial disclosure forms was not listed as a liability on his personal forms, even as he had disclosed a $20,000 to $50,000 car loan he took out for the Nissan he drove. He claimed no income. Lie. In a later interview, Santos said he was able to take advantage of a network of around 15,000 wealthy investors, family offices, institutions and endowments after leaving Harbour City Capital and forming Devolder Organisation LLC to get contracts worth several $1 million. If you're looking at a $20 million yacht, my referral fee can then be anywhere between $200,000 and $400,000, he said. He did not identify any of his clients when he was asked to do so. Likely again to be showmanship, grandiosity and lies. During his campaign, Santos spent prodigiously. He used campaign funds to pay for shirts for staff from Bruck Brothers, meals at the restaurant at the Bergdorf Goodman department store, and $40,000 in airline fees, including to locations in California, Texas and Florida, and a stay at the Breakers in Palm Beach, Florida. Part of $30,000 in hotel bills, $14,000 paid to car services, and an equivalent sum spent at a Queen's restaurant. That much airfare, the Times later noted, is far more than most candidates spend on their first election, and closer to the amount spent by party leaders who have served in Congress for years. Grandiosity, misuse of funds, appropriation of asset, lack of boundary recognition, sense of entitlement, lack of accountability. 2 campaign aides told the Times that staff were increasingly concerned during the campaign that Santos was more interested in spending the $3 million raised for the race frivolously than on winning the election. Demonstrates also the narrow focus of this narcissist in terms of looking at the now rather than the bigger picture. Santos's campaign finance reports listed a company called Cleaner 123 as receiving $11,000 over 4 months in rent for campaign staff housing in the district. Neighbours of the house said that Santos and his partner appeared to have been living there during that time. Lie, misappropriation of assets, lack of boundary recognition, sense of entitlement, lack of accountability. There have been discrepancies in reported donations to other candidates. Contradictory behaviour, lack of accountability. There's been an unitemised $100.99 in expenses. In a later article, the Times noted that Santos's campaign spent more than $5,000 on flights to and hotel stays in Washington and West Palm Beach, Florida, for Republican fundraisers in the first quarter of 2021, a time when the next congressional election was almost 2 years away, and he had no primary challenger. By the end of the year, Santos's reported expenses for those trips had reached $90,000 and become more lavish, with hundreds of dollars spent on transportation, hotels, and food around the country. demonstrative of a lack of accountability and expensive tastes. In early 2022, the campaign filed amended reports. Among the changes made were upward adjustments to some of the expenses he had reported at the end of 2021. A $60 meal at a Michigan sushi restaurant was now reported as having cost $100.99, along with 3 additional expenses that exact amount on that date. 5 previously reported Uber and taxi rides went from $267 to $445. A subsequent amended report in May reported no transactions on the date to which the sushi dinner had previously been attributed. Fraud, revision of history, asset appropriation, lack of accountability. Santos's campaign financial disclosures went on to include many other expenses of $199.99, 1 cent below the $200 threshold at which campaigns must provide receipts and disclose recipients. An election law expert the Times talked to suggested that this could indicate awareness of the law and an intent to violate it. One of those expenses was for a Miami hotel where rooms rarely rent for under $600 a night. The Times later reported that other Miami businesses where the campaign reported spending money could not find receipts for those amounts, or said the expenses did not reflect the prices of the products allegedly purchased. Fraud, sense of entitlement, lack of accountability. Politico later compared Santos's campaign reports to other congressional campaigns that sent similar total amounts and found that only 9% of them had recorded any expenses in the $199 to $200 range. Most of those were to the video conferencing service Zoom, which offers a business plan for $199.90. Of 4,300 campaigns that filed reports during the cycle, only 25 reported any expenses of exactly $199.99. Of those, the most times that amount was claimed was 4, while Santos's campaign claimed it 37 times. Politico called this a statistical improbability. The Times noted that the $199.99 transactions reached a total of 1,200 separate payments in Santos's early 2022 campaign. Amended report totaling over $250,000. They were still in the amended report from May of that year, which had removed the larger sushi dinner bill and taxi expenditures. By the end of the campaign, the total unitemized expenditures had exceeded $365,000. It appears that this was covering up how money was being spent and shows fraudulent activity, demonstrative of a sense of entitlement and a lack of accountability. During his 2 congressional runs in 2020 and 2022, Santos reported having spent over $25,000 at Il Bacco, an eatery popular for New York City Republican events. He had also entertained prospective Harbor City clients there. Santos's 2022 campaign reports owing Il Bacco nearly $19,000 for its election night victory party, in addition to 7 of the instances where the campaign had reportedly spent exactly $199.99. Santos appointed Il Bacco's owner, Joe Opperdisano, along with his daughter, the restaurant's manager, to his campaign's Small Business for Santos's coalition. Opperdisano in turn donated $6,500 to his campaign and its associated PACs. Opperdisano's brother, Rocco, also gave Santos's campaign $500, a facially illegal contribution, seeing he is not a US citizen and had his permanent resident status revoked after guns and drugs were seized from his properties in 2009. There's more with regard to the creation of and loans to PAC, that there have been FEC investigations and complaints, with problems about disclosure reports, exceeding a cycle limit with regard to funding, and insufficient information being provided with regard to terms and co-guarantors of collateral of loans to the company. All of this amounts to, of course, a lack of accountability and a sense of entitlement. There's the alleged use of fictitious donors. Mother Jones reporters found in late January 2023 that many contributions to Santos's 2020 campaign were from people whose names and addresses were fictitious or non-existent, all reporters having given through WinRed, an online processor of small donor contributions for Republicans. Some were from real people who denied having donated the amount claimed. These accounted for 12 donations, totaling $30,000 of the $338,000 Santos reported raising from individual contributors. 9 of those donors were among the 45 listed as having given Santos the maximum allowed under law for both primary and general cycles. There's alleged credit fraud and misuse of WinRed in relation to a report from TPM that explains that there were contributions given by people over the phone by credit card, and the transactions were charged at a greater amount. That there were individuals who said that their cards had been made to make unauthorized contributions to Tina Forte, the Republican challenger to Representative AOC. And there were further discrepancies with regard to the campaign's use of WinRed. There are allegations of misrepresentations in funding. There are the Brazilian check fraud charges from when he was back in Brazil. In 2008, he forged checks stolen from a man his mother was caring for to buy $700 worth of clothing. When writing the check, Santos presented identification bearing his photo, but the check owner's name. The store owner became suspicious when the signatures on 2 checks did not match. Santos later admitted to the theft in a message to the store clerk and confessed to police before he was charged with check fraud in 2010. The case was archived by a Brazilian court in 2013 because the authorities there were unable to locate Santos. After the Brazilian charges became widely known in December 2022, Santos said, "I'm not a criminal here, nor here or in Brazil or any jurisdiction in the world." Lie, criminal activity, asset appropriation. There are various evictions and unpaid judgments, which show a lack of accountability, also show a sense of entitlement, show an absence of emotional empathy for the people that he owes money to. Santos has claimed that he founded and ran the Friends of Pets United charity from 2013 to 2018, and his campaign biography claimed that FOPU rescued over 2,500 animals. The claims are unsubstantiated, reported the New York Times, citing interviews with former volunteers and associates of Santos that describe FOPU's scattered efforts and detailed that far fewer than 2,500 animals were saved. Grandiosity, revision of history, facade management, lie. In November 2017, Santos was charged with theft by deception in York County, Pennsylvania, regarding bad checks to dog breeders from his account. An Amish father recalled to CNN that Santos, whom he described as nervous and fidgety, arrived with a woman who seemed to be his assistant, told her to pick up 2 dogs and put them in the car, then came in. He and Santos quickly agreed on the price. Santos insisted on writing a check when the farmer told him he would only take payment in cash, saying that he would not carry the amount of cash necessary around and that he could only pay with a check, which bounced as the farmer suspected it would. Days after writing $15,125 in these checks for puppies, Santos and Fopo hosted an adoption event at a pet store with a variety of purebred dogs, according to the store's social media account and an event attendee. Tiffany Bogosian, Santos' lawyer friend from his youth, assisted in getting the charges dropped after Santos told her that his checkbook had been stolen in 2017 and he'd received an extradition warrant from Pennsylvania at his New York address in 2020. She argued that none of the signatures on the check matched Santos's and that they were different from each other. Bogosian said Santos told her he had also told Pennsylvania prosecutors he worked for the SEC. His record was expunged in November 2021 with no further detail than is provided by the York County District Court. There's been allegations of mishandling funds. Furthermore, 2 of his former roommates have accused him of stealing personal effects, including a $520 Burberry scarf he wore to a January 5th, 2021 Stop the Steal rally, and said that expensive dress shirts, phones and checks went missing while Santos was living with them. Theft, sense of entitlement, lack of emotional empathy, lack of accountability for behaviour. Yasser Ravello, who lived with Santos, his mother, sister and his boyfriend in 2013-14, claimed the Santos family kept his dresser when he moved out. In February 2023, CBS News reported on unpaid fines for traffic violations since 2016 that Santos may have committed. New York City records showed that a car with a license plate registered to Santos was cited for 29 traffic violations. Failure to follow the law, a sense of entitlement, lack of accountability. This included red light violations, toll violations, and double parking, of which 17 were paid and 12 were unpaid, with over $2,100 still owed. Sense of entitlement, lack of accountability through failure to pay. Florida records showed that a car registered to Santos was cited for 6 traffic violations in 2016 and 2017, of which 4 toll violations, totaling nearly $1,300, were unpaid, while 2 red light violations were paid. The Times had previously reported that the vulnerability study Santos' campaign did in late 2021 found that his Florida driver's license had been suspended. The New York Post reported that a Nissan Rogue car Santos frequently drove was cited for speeding 5 times after he was elected in November 2022, and that 4 of the speeding citations were in school zones. Also in February 2023, Derek Myers, the prospective staffer who secretly recorded Santos admitting errors of judgment in making some of his claims, filed a sexual harassment complaint against Santos with the House Ethics Committee, alleging Santos had touched his groin inappropriately while inviting him out to a karaoke bar and telling Myers that his husband was out of town. Myers also alleged that Santos had violated House rules by having him work as a volunteer for a week before his paperwork was processed. A further raft of instances that demonstrate how George Santos engages in a raft of behaviours which are all narcissistic indicators. That's a run-through of some of the instances of his behaviour. There's more and more detail, but quite frankly, I could be here all week labelling the behaviours of George Santos, and you get a flavour, most clearly, for how he behaves. In the next part, I'm going to explain to you precisely why he's a narcissist. Join me there.